A man sold the most valuable inheritance in human history for a single bowl of red soup. Romans chapter 9, verse 13, records a divine verdict issued before two twins had even drawn a single breath. Jacob, I loved, but Esau, I hated. This is not a metaphor. It is a prenatal declaration of war. Now, fast forward 2,000 years. A king sits on the throne of David. His name is Herod, and he is not a Jew. He is a sleeper agent from Esau's rejected bloodline, an Edomite. His first act against the true king of the Jews was to order the massacre of every baby boy in Bethlehem. The war that started in a mother's womb followed the Messiah all the way to his manger. Welcome to the Forbidden Bible, where we investigate the ancient conspiracies and the bloodlines that still shape our world. In 2026, subscribe now or remain in the dark. Let us begin the file on the Red Nation. It all begins in the absolute silence of a dark womb. Genesis 25:22. The children struggled within Rebekah, but the English translation is a weak shadow of the ancient truth. The Hebrew word for that struggle is rats, and it does not mean to move or to kick like a normal infant. It means to crush, to shatter, to break into pieces with violent intent. Two babies were trying to execute each other before they ever saw the light of day. This was not a pregnancy. It was a high-stakes cage match between two opposing spirits, two cosmic forces, forced into one small space. Rebekah was terrified by the internal tearing of her own body. She felt the vibration of an ancient hate. She asked God why she had to endure such divine agony. The answer was a prenatal declaration of war. Two nations are in your womb. Two peoples shall be divided from your body. One people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Notice the precision of the Creator. God did not say you have two sons. He said, you have two civilizations, two conflicting systems of thought, destined to collide for 4,000 years. This was not divine favoritism. This was divine foreknowledge of a genetic and spiritual destiny. When the 9 months of war ended, the first came out red, completely covered in hair, like a garment of fur, a freak of nature. They named him Esau, in Hebrew, Admoni, the Red One. This name shares its blood root with Adamah, the word for the red earth of the ground. Esau was a man of the soil, driven by blood, bone, and raw impulse. He was the ultimate predator, a creature of the senses. The second came out gripping his brother's heel, like a soldier trying to pull a general back from the finish line. They named him Jacob, the heel grabber, the supplanter, the one who waits in the shadows for the perfect moment to take. One womb, one blood, but two spirits that could never find a common language. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born, a patriarch of peace, who waited 20 years for this moment. Yet Isaac loved the smell of the wild field on Esau. He loved the venison and the violent power of the hunter. Isaac saw the physical strength, but Rebekah saw the prophetic blueprint. Esau grew into a man of the field, a man who would rather kill a beast than talk to his God. Jacob was the opposite. The text says he was a quiet man, dwelling in tents. The Hebrew word is tam. It means whole, complete, perfect in his integrity. While Esau was out chasing the fleeting winds, Jacob was in the tents, studying the eternal promises passed down from his grandfather, Abraham. The genetic fuse was lit in the desert of Canaan. The red nation was beginning to breathe. One brother lived for the hunt of the day. The other lived for the promise of the ages. And the world was about to catch fire. The day of the great exchange was an ordinary afternoon, but the air in the desert of Canaan was heavy with a cosmic shift. Esau returned from the field, exhausted. His hands were stained with the blood of the hunt, but his soul was hollow and dry. In the tents, Jacob was cooking a red stew of lentils. The Hebrew text screams at us in this specific verse. Esau does not even ask for food by its name. He does not say, "Brother, please give me a bowl of stew." He shouts, "Give me some of that red, red." He repeats the word, "Ha, Adam, ha, Adam." He was so blinded by his physical hunger that his entire vocabulary collapsed into a single color. He only saw the red, the color of his own skin, the color of the earth. He worshipped more than his creator. The Hebrew verb he uses for eating is not to eat. It is a word used for animals, to gulp, to swallow greedily. Jacob saw the opening he had waited for since the womb. "Sell me your birthright this day." Jacob was not asking for a double portion of sheep or a larger share of silver and gold. The birthright in the line of Abraham was the messianic promise. It was the legal and spiritual right to carry the bloodline of the Redeemer, to be the ancestor of the King of Kings. Esau's response is the most expensive sentence in human history. "Look, I am about to die. So what use is the birthright to me?" He was not dying of starvation. He was a master hunter who could find food in any canyon. He was just impatient. He was a man of the now. In his mind, the invisible promise of a future God was worth less than a hot bowl of beans right now. The contract was signed in the steam of the lentils. The Bible delivers a surgical verdict on this moment. Esau despised his birthright. The Hebrew word is bizarre, to treat as garbage, to view a divine inheritance as worthless trash. Hebrews chapter 12 calls him a profane person, a man who treats the sacred as common, like a man who sells a kingdom for a sandwich. But the tragedy was not finished. Years later, the contract was enforced in the dark. Jacob, coached by his mother, Rebekah, disguised himself in Esau's hairy clothes. He brought meat to his blind father, Isaac. Isaac touched the skin. He smelled the field, but he felt a strange vibration in his spirit. He said, "The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's." Isaac released the irrevocable blessing of the firstborn, the wealth of the earth, the dew of heaven. When Esau arrived and realized the theft, the Bible says he let out a loud and exceedingly bitter cry. He wept until his soul shook with rage. But look closely at his tears. They were not tears of repentance for his sin. They were tears of regret for his loss. He wanted the blessing, but he still hated the God of the blessing. Isaac's hands were empty. The blessing was gone. The covenant had migrated to the younger brother. Esau's rage turned into a vow of murder. "The days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." From that day on, his identity was sealed in blood. They called him Edom, the Red Nation, defined by a single moment of absolute contempt. He did not lose his inheritance. He threw it away, and the silence of the desert recorded the transaction. The older twin was now a servant to the promise he once held. The red soup was gone in minutes, but the red curse would last for 4,000 years. Esau did not just lose a meal, he lost his place. In the genealogy of God, Esau did not just leave Canaan, he migrated with a dark purpose. He took his wives, his cattle, and his burning genetic rage. He settled in the rugged mountain terrain of Seir, south and east of the Dead Sea, in modern-day southern Jordan. This was not a random choice for a scattered tribe. Seir was a natural fortress of towering, red sandstone cliffs, rising hundreds of meters straight up from the desert floor. Before the Edomites arrived, the Horites lived there in caves. They were troglodytes, primitive cave dwellers. Esau's descendants did not just displace them. The Bible says they destroyed them and dwelt in their place. They conquered the stone itself and stole their technology. They carved a sophisticated kingdom directly into the crimson rock face. The Bible calls their capital Selah, in Hebrew, meaning the rock. Later, the Greeks would rename it Petra. To enter this city, an entire army had to pass through the Sikh, a narrow canyon gorge, nearly 2 kilometers long, with vertical rock walls 80 meters high on each side. In some places, the path is only 3 meters wide. A single squad of archers could hold off a global superpower. The Edomites felt absolutely invincible in their high nests. And here is the detail that the world forgets. Edom had organized kings before Israel even had a leader. Genesis 36:31 records the legal list. These are the kings who reigned in Edom, before any king reigned over the children of Israel. While the Israelites were slaves in Egypt, the Edomites were building an empire in the Red Rocks. Their national god was called Kos, a terrifying deity of war, storms, and fertility. Archaeologists have found his name on seals and ancient inscriptions. Under the shadow of Kos, they grew obscenely wealthy. They controlled the King's Highway, the most critical trade artery of the ancient world, connecting Egypt to Mesopotamia and the riches of Arabia. Every caravan carrying spices, incense, silk, and gold had to pass through Edomite checkpoints. They taxed the world for every step it took through their canyons. They held a monopoly on copper and precious metals. Geography made them rich. Wealth made them arrogant. They looked down from their red cliffs like eagles and whispered, "Who can bring me down to the ground?" But God was recording every word of their pride. The prophet Obadiah delivered the divine indictment. "Though you soar like the eagle, though you set your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down." They ignored the warning because they trusted in the red stone. When Moses led 2 million refugees out of Egypt, he reached the border of Edom. He sent a humble diplomatic request to his cousin, the king of Edom. "Please, let us pass through your land. We will stay on the main road. We will pay for every drop of water and every step of the journey." Moses was begging his own blood for mercy. Edom's response was a brutal and immediate slap in the face. "You shall not pass if you try." I will come out against you with the sword. Blood relatives slammed the door on the starving and the thirsty. Sons of Isaac denied life to the sons of Isaac. This moment turned a family grudge into a permanent national war. Saul waged war against them to defend the borders, but it was King David who subdued them with industrial blood. His general, Joab, spent 6 months systematically killing every male in Edom. The violence was cold and calculated. An Edomite prince named Hadad survived as a child. He escaped to the palace of Pharaoh in Egypt. He married the queen's sister and returned years later as a divine adversary against Solomon. Generation after generation, the Edomites clawed back. King Amaziah struck down 10,000 in the Valley of Salt and captured their fortress capital. He took 10,000 captives to the top of the Red Cliffs and threw them off. One by one, the rocks were stained with the color that defined them. Edom revolted. Edom invaded. Edom bled Israel from the south. They sat on their red thrones and laughed at the prophets, thinking their geography was their ultimate salvation. But the red stone was already beginning to crumble under the invisible weight of a 4,000-year-old curse. 800 years of border wars were just the beginning of the nightmare. The ultimate mask of brotherhood fell in 586 BC. The Babylonian army, under Nebuchadnezzar, surrounded Jerusalem for 2 years. The city became a furnace of absolute agony and slow death. The Book of Lamentations describes mothers driven to madness, boiling their own children for food because the starvation was total. Solomon's masterpiece, the Temple of Gold and Cedar, was stripped, looted, and burned to black rubble. The Ark of the Covenant vanished into the dark smoke of history. But as the temple of God burned, a familiar face appeared at the gates. The Edomites did not come to help their starving cousins. They did not stand neutral in the shadows of the desert. They participated in the industrial slaughter of their own blood. Psalm 137, verse 7, preserves the raw and evil cry of Edom. Jewish exiles weeping by the rivers of Babylon remembered their screams. "Tear it down," the Edomites shouted, while the temple burned. "Tear it down." To its very foundations, they were the cheerleaders of absolute destruction. While the Babylonians lit the fire, Edom provided the cruel energy. They danced in the ruins of their brother's house, but their betrayal went much deeper than words and dancing. The prophet Obadiah wrote an entire book as a legal indictment. Read the charges like a district attorney in the court of heaven. On the day you stood aloof, while strangers carried off his wealth, you watched with a cold and hungry heart. You should not have gloated over your brother in the day of his misfortune. You entered the city while it was still burning to loot the remains. But the most demonic act happened at the crossroads. Jewish refugees, terrified, bleeding, and carrying their infants, ran toward the south. They thought they were running toward family. Instead, the Edomites waited at the narrow mountain passes. They did not open their arms. They opened their swords. Obadiah chapter 1 verse 14 is a forensic record of the crime. You should not have waited at the crossroads to cut down the fugitives. You should not have handed over the survivors to the enemy. They hunted the refugees like wild animals in a trap. They captured the survivors, and they sold them back to the enemy for a price. Blood was sold for silver. Kinship was traded for plunder. A brother stabbing a brother. At his most vulnerable moment, the prophet Amos delivered his own searing verdict. He pursued his brother with a sword, stifling all compassion. His anger raged continually. His fury flamed unchecked for 20 generations. This was not a moment of sudden rage. This was a furnace of hatred that burned for centuries. God watched every laugh, every looted coin, every refugee betrayed. And he raised a coordinated cross-generational prosecution. 7 independent prophets, 7 death sentences. First, Obadiah wrote an entire book to prosecute this one defendant. You will be covered with shame. You will be destroyed forever. Second, Amos delivered the verdict of fire upon Teman. The palaces of Bozrah will be consumed. Third, Isaiah saw the sword of God descending on Edom, the land becoming a wasteland where no one would pass through forever. Fourth, Jeremiah promised to strip Esau bare, to uncover every secret hiding place in the red rocks, so he cannot hide. Fifth, Ezekiel saw the mountains filled with the slain. Because of your ancient hostility, I will make you a perpetual desolation. Sixth, Joel announced Edom would become a desolate wilderness because of the violence done to the people of Judah. And finally, Malachi recorded the closing argument of the Creator. I have loved Jacob, but Esau I have hated. They may build, but I will demolish. The Red Nation thought they had finally won the war of the womb. They thought the younger brother was erased from history, but they were walking into the mouth of a cosmic debt, and the interest was 1,000 years of fire. The rocks of Petra were listening, and the judgment was already written in the dust of the desert. God sentenced Edom to permanent destruction, but Edom did not die a simple death. It did something far more dangerous, far more calculated. It shapeshifted, changed its name, and moved inside the walls of the covenant. After the Babylonian exile, the red rocks of Petra began to crumble from within, not from war, but from displacement. The Nabateans, fierce nomadic tribes from northern Arabia, began to push the Edomites out of their impregnable cliffs, the very rocks they thought would protect them forever. The proud eagles of Esau were forced to flee westward, migrating into the southern Judean Negev, settling in and around Hebron, the sacred burial ground of Abraham himself. The Greeks gave them a new label, the Idumaeans. New name, new address, but the same ancient fury, the same rejected bloodline, and the same spiritual trajectory of Esau. Around 125 BC, a major shift occurred. The Hasmonean king, John Hyrcanus I, conquered the Idumeans and issued a brutal, life-altering ultimatum: convert to Judaism, be circumcised, and adopt our laws, or leave this land forever. This was circumcision at sword point, a forced religious conversion that would backfire on the entire Jewish nation. The Edomites became Jews in name, but their hearts still beat with the same rage that traded a birthright for soup. They were now operating inside the walls, wearing the robes of the faithful while carrying the grudge of the rejected. Within one generation, this Idumaean family began to claw their way to the highest levels of Judean politics. Antipater the Idumaean became the chief advisor, the shadow power behind the Hasmonean rulers. And then came his son, a man who would redefine cold-blooded ambition and monstrous brilliance. His name was Herod. In 40 BC, the Roman Senate granted him a title that should have belonged only to the line of David. They called him King of the Jews. Think about the absolute irony. An Edomite, a direct descendant of Esau, was now sitting on the throne of Jacob. The man from the line that God said would serve the younger was now ruling over the covenant nation. The interloper had stolen the crown, and he compensated for his lack of legitimacy with blood and architecture. Herod was an obsessive builder. He rebuilt the temple in Jerusalem on a scale that dwarfed Solomon's original masterpiece. He built the port of Caesarea, the fortress of Masada, and the palace of Herodium, not out of devotion to God, but as a political calculation to pacify a population that knew he was a half-Jew, a slave to Rome. His paranoia was total, his cruelty industrial. He murdered his own wife, Mariamne, a princess he married just to legitimize his reign. He drowned her brother in a swimming pool, murdered her grandfather, and eventually executed 3 of his own sons on suspicion of conspiracy. Emperor Augustus reportedly said, "It is safer to be Herod's pig than Herod's son," because as a nominal Jew, Herod would not eat pork, but he had no problem slaughtering his own flesh and blood. The paranoia of the Edomite king reached its absolute peak when a group of magi walked into Jerusalem with one question: "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east." The text says Herod was troubled. The Greek word is terasso, meaning deeply agitated, trembling with anxiety. Why was he trembling? Because the true heir of Jacob had arrived. The Messiah, the one from the line that held the birthright Esau had despised 2,000 years ago, was now on the scene. The war that started with 2 babies crushing each other in Rebekah's womb had followed the bloodline to a manger in Bethlehem. Herod's response was the ultimate act of the Edomite grudge. He ordered the systematic execution of every male child in Bethlehem, 2 years old and under. The descendant of the man who sold the birthright was now trying to murder the firstborn of all creation. He tried to keep with the blood of infants what his ancestor had thrown away for a bowl of red stew. Esau's rage had not diminished over 60 generations. It had simply refined itself into a crown-wearing, baby-killing machine. But Herod died a gruesome death in 4 BC, consumed by disease from the inside out, while the king he tried to kill lived on. The Idumaean dynasty was a house built on sand, and its final hour was fast approaching. The question that haunts every historian of the ancient world is simple. Where are they now? If you look at a modern map of the Middle East, you will find the rebirth of Israel, but you will never find Edom. They did not just lose a war, they lost their very place in the memory of man. The prophecy of Obadiah declared, "There shall be no survivor of the house of Esau." This was not a poetic warning, it was a mathematical certainty. After the Babylonian exile, the proud eagles of Edom were forced out of their red rock fortresses by the Nabateans, a rising power of desert nomads who seized the trade routes and the legendary city of Petra. The Edomites were pushed westward, forced to live in the southern Judean desert as the Idumaeans. But their final blood-soaked chapter was written in 70 AD. During the Great Jewish Revolt against Rome, the Idumaeans made one last violent stand, but not for the God of Israel. Josephus, the historian who witnessed the ruins, records a scene of pure horror. 20,000 Idumaean warriors were invited into Jerusalem by a radical faction, but they turned the holy city into a slaughterhouse. Under the cover of a massive storm, they butchered the high priests, Zechariah and Ananias, and left their bodies for the dogs. They filled the temple courts with blood until it flowed like a river down the marble steps. They thought they were the masters of the chaos, but the Roman legions of Titus were already at the gates. When the temple of Herod the Edomite king burned to the ground, the Idumaean people burned with it. They were not taken into a separate exile. They simply dissolved. They were swallowed by the sword, by plague, and by the absolute erasure of their national identity. By the 2nd century, the name Idumea vanished from the Roman tax rolls. The house of Esau was stubble, just as the prophets had screamed for 1,000 years. Today, Petra stands as a spectacular pink-stoned ghost town in the Jordanian desert. Millions of tourists walk through the sick, marveling at the treasury and the royal tombs. But they are walking through a graveyard of pride. The temples of their war god Kus are silent, the caves are empty, and the red stone is the only witness to a nation that chose a grudge over a blessing. Even Herod, the greatest Idumaean of them all, could not escape the verdict. History records his death as a nightmare of disease, his body rotting while he was still alive, consumed by worms and excruciating pain. The king who tried to kill the Messiah died in a state of filth, while the king he feared lives forever. This is the mirror of history for us in 2026. The story of Edom is the story of the temporary trying to steal the eternal. It is the story of a man who was so hungry for a bowl of soup that he forgot he was the heir to the universe. We still hear the whisper of Esau today. What good is the promise if I am hungry right now? We sell our integrity for a promotion, our peace for a moment of revenge, and our birthright for the dopamine of the immediate. But the ruins of Petra tell a different story, a story that some transactions are irreversible. Hebrews 12:16 warns us. Esau sought the blessing afterward with tears, but he found no place for repentance. The door had closed, the soup was gone, and the red rocks had become a tomb. Don't trade your destiny for a meal that won't satisfy you by morning. The God of Jacob is still calling, but the house of Esau is dust. If this journey through the forbidden Bible opened your eyes, share it with someone standing at their own crossroads. Subscribe to Bible Origins, where we unearth the ancient conspiracies that still shape our souls. I will see you in the next file.